and our treasures and our stuff mean a lot to us, don't they? When we go somewhere, we always manage to take those things with us in some way.
Now, sometimes you gotta move. You gotta get a bigger house. Why? Too much stuff. You gotta move all your stuff. And maybe put some of your stuff in storage. Now imagine that. There's a whole industry based on keeping an eye on your stuff. Enough about your stuff. Let's talk about other people's stuff. Did you ever notice when you go to somebody else's house, you never quite feel 100% at home? You know why? No room for your stuff. Somebody else's stuff is all over the place. And what awful stuff it is. Where did they get this stuff? And if you have to stay overnight at someone's house, you know, unexpectedly, and they give you a little room to sleep in and they don't use that often, someone died 11 years ago, and they haven't moved any of his stuff. Or wherever they give you to sleep, usually right near the door is a dresser, and there's never any room on the dresser for your stuff.
Have you ever asked this question, why do I have so much stuff? Why do I have extra? Why do I have more than I need? Asking these questions, if you haven't, in another way, if you look at them another way, could turn your entire perspective on everything you have completely upside down. Asking these questions could lead you from a place of being lost and confused about what life is really about, why am I here, what's my purpose, to a place where all your money, all your treasures, and all your time and stuff makes sense for the very first time. We kind of touched on it a little bit last week. But most of the time we ask these questions. Why don't I have more? You're always comparing with someone. What's it going to take to get more? When will I have more? And as long as you see it this way, you are creating an artificial sense of need. Think about that. And you will constantly bump up against your income as being substandard for the lifestyle that you've decided that you need to have. A lot of people do this. And once you begin seeing things as wanting them all the time, they start becoming, I have to have this all the time. I want a bigger home, into, I need to have a bigger home. Or, I'd like to have a nicer car, and turn that into, I need to have a new car now. After a while, the wants become more and more, turning into everything's a need. You have to have it. You keep wanting more and more. You keep needing to have it. And still, the funny thing is, you still feel like you don't have everything you need. There's something missing. So what if we were to ask these questions in a different way? Why do I have so much? Why do I have extra? And why do I have more than I need? But Pastor, this doesn't apply to me. I'm not rich. I'm not like a lot of those people that have all that stuff. I live paycheck to paycheck. I don't even have a paycheck right now. I mean, the economy and everything, there's a lot of people listening that's going, but that doesn't apply to me. I'm barely making it week to week. But I'm not just talking about money. I'm talking about our money, our treasures, and our stuff. Now, the interesting thing is, in the Gospels, Jesus answers this question. Isn't that amazing? And it all began because we gave into our wants. This is the culture we live in. The culture we live in rewards our wants, doesn't it? You see it all the time on TV, on the internet, everything. It's like, you want this, you need to have this. It rewards the wants with a justified, legitimate need we've created for ourselves. Our wants lead to an artificial sense of need. We ask ourselves these questions. Why don't I have that? I see that on there. Why don't I have peace in my life? Why don't I feel free all the time? Why do I always worry about my money? Why am I always discontent? And we want, and we want, and we want. Even though we're believers who follow a God that has set us free from the bondage of this world. What's wrong with this picture? And this happens to all of us. I'm not just saying a few people. I think everybody goes in this in and out. We go in and out. It's like you don't make one check or you get a little less. What are we going to do? You know, it's just that's how we are. This answer applies to all of us that Jesus is going to talk about, especially to those of us who have allowed our wants to become the absolute needs that we have to have. Because it's a need we have created. If you have a Bible, and I want to start doing this, when we read the scripture I'm talking about it, bring your Bible if you want. I mean, it's, you know, because we use the screen, I don't want everybody to feel they don't need a Bible anymore and they just read this up here. But if you want to bring your Bible, bring it. Or use the Pew Bible. And follow along if you want. We're going to be going through Luke 12, 13 to 21. And I'm going to have it up there. Just if you want to follow. We're going to read today the parable of the rich fool. It starts off with, someone in the crowd spoke to Jesus. Teacher, he said, tell my brother to divide the family property with me. So somebody's probably passed away and left a great deal of money. And this guy, he was, you know, going to get an inheritance, but he wasn't getting his fair share. Jesus replied, friend, who made me a judge or an umpire between you? Why are you asking me, Jesus says? That's your affair. And you're coming to me to ask that you need them to tell, you know, so-and-so, oh, I need my money. Then he said to them, Jesus said, watch out to the people who are sitting there around him. Be on your guard against wanting more and more things. So here's this guy coming up to Jesus saying, you know, can you help me in this family dispute over here? And he's talking to all this crowd. And Jesus looks at him and tells him, you know, beware. But he's telling everybody that. That wasn't really what the guy was asking Jesus. I mean, according to him, he wanted Jesus to do something for him. But Jesus starts talking about be aware that you're asking for more and more. Wait a minute, this guy has an inheritance coming. Some of the people in the crowd are going, what's Jesus talking about? He's talking about wanting more and more, and be aware of that. But Jesus starts talking about, you know, being greedy. Greedy. In fact, in some translations, it says greedy when Jesus addresses this. What Jesus is saying about this guy, it sounds like this guy is being overly greedy in his situation. Okay? Now, this is very important for us to listen to and get this. And let me tell you why. Jesus defines greed for us. It is hard to see greed in the mirror. Okay? Now, we can see greed in someone else, can't we? If someone's being a little stingy and wanting all this stuff, well, it's easy to see in her or him. But it's hard for us to see greed in our own mirror. We see anger in other people. We can actually see anger in ourselves. We realize when we get too angry about things. When we're feeling guilty about something, eventually it creeps up on you and you kind of understand you got that. And we can see when we're jealous about something. I mean, it gets worse and worse and you realize that. Have you ever heard anybody say, I'm just too greedy? I mean, they just don't see it on themselves, okay? Greedy people usually say things like, I'm careful. I'm a good money manager. I'm a saver. Now, who says that? All of us, pretty much. It's very hard for someone to see that they are being greedy. This is such a subtle thing that happens, and there are all kinds of greed. So we all need to be on the lookout for it, and that's what Jesus is trying to say. Okay? To which again he would respond if someone would say, that person is greedy. You'd probably say, oh yeah, I can tell that right away. But you know, I'm not like that at all. I mean, I've even said that way in the past. I remember you see someone's very evident of being greedy, or even on the news, or you know, things happening in the world. You can tell when there's somebody being stingy and greedy, but you're not like that. But when the time and place for wanting, and that's basically greedy, is wanting something, right? When the time is just right and the setting is right there, we can all climb right into being greedy. is not made up of how much a person has. In other words, your life does not equal to what you own. And we know that intellectually. But Jesus is pointing out to something that drives us emotionally, that feelings thing again. The best way to describe this is, let's say, well, I don't want to say an alien, but let's just say somebody visits our world, okay? And they come and they start watching us. They're going to stay for a little while. They're monitoring how humans act. Okay, one of the things that he notices is our food, our relation with food, okay? What conclusions would this alien or whatever come to about the human population if they were to watch us with our intake and everything with food? Let's see.
They always got food. We eat to live. These guys live to eat. Let me show you what I'm talking about. The human doll is called a pie of hope. The human being is called a couch potato. That is the device to summon food. That is one of the many voices of food. That is the form of the passion of the food. That is one of the many food transportation vehicles. Humans bring the food, take the food, ship the food, they drive the food, then wear the food. That makes the food hot. That keeps the food cold. That, I'm not sure what it is. What do you know? Food! It's the altar where they worship food. That's what they eat when they eat too much food. That guilt they eat more food. Food, 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 food. So, you think they have enough? Well, they don't. For humans, enough is never enough. And what do they do with the stuff they don't eat? They put it in gleaming silver cans. Just words. Dig in!
I watched that. It's funny, but you know, there's a lot of truth to that.
Yeah.
Jesus points out how we can easily slip into a thought process thinking our life is about the abundance of our possessions. So Jesus goes into this amazing parable, continuing in Luke 16. Then Jesus told him a story. He said, a certain rich man's land produced a good crop. This was a rich man that already had enough, but had now more than enough. He thought to himself, what should I do? I don't have any place to store these new crops. He had a problem. Where was he going to put all the extra? He already had extra, but now he had extra. Now some of us listening to this point might be saying, well, you could look around. I'm sure you could give it to some people that need some extra grain. But remember, it's hard to see greed in the mirror. We can see it in him, obviously, but he can't see it in himself. He's assuming that this extra, like you and I, many times, when something unexpected happens, oh, wow, what a break, or, oh, I could use this extra money. And, you know, there's nothing wrong with that, but we're talking extra, and when you keep it all for yourself. But this guy, just like us, saw this extra as for him. And when we have extra, we say, oh, right, instead of, oh, you know, what should we do with this? We should immediately give it to him. I mean, our first thing is, wow, I get to enjoy something, you know. Let's reward ourselves. If I have extra, it's obviously for me. So we can understand this poor guy's dilemma, right? With all that stuff. Who has so much that he doesn't even know what to do with it. And soon he comes up with a plan, which we usually do, right? We got an extra amount of something. We're going to come up with a good plan. Okay. Verse 18. Then he said, this is what I'll do. I will tear down my storerooms and build bigger ones. I will store all my grain and all my things in them. This guy should be on the cover of a magazine, right? You think about it. He's very successful. Isn't there a guy like this on TV, on these certain channels you see, Get Rich Guys? These are the guys that have figured out how you can get rich fast. All you have to do is pay just $19.95 for the book or something, and they tell you how. He was wealthy, and he got wealthier. Isn't that the dream of most people, to do better all the time? Isn't that the goal of being successful? Isn't that what we're chasing after as in the world? That's still the American dream. And he tore down his perfectly good barns to make possible to keep excess grain for himself. Verse 19. I'll say to myself, you have plenty of good things stored away for many years. Take life easy, eat, drink, and have a great time. And I remember being in that same place many times in the past. An extra check, or you got a bonus, and oh, now I can finally enjoy life like so-and-so does. There's always that end too. So-and-so does, you know. He did the smart thing. He planned for his future. But what we discover is that he just didn't plan far enough out. He planned to take care of himself. He just didn't plan to take care of himself far enough out. There was a fatal flaw in this guy's thinking. And what was that? He thought, since I have X number of years of wealth and stuff, I can enjoy my X number of years of life in leisure and wealth. His possessions were for him, the extra was for him, and the abundance was for him. His problem wasn't that he was rich. That's not what Jesus is saying here. And many times, I know way back, there was a few of those with the rich people and the poor, and I always thought, you don't want to be rich. God doesn't like that. That's not what he's saying. His problem is, we're about to discover, was why he was rich. There was a purpose. And if you were to ask him the same questions that we brought up earlier, why do I have so much? Why do I have extra? Why do I have more than I need? His answer would probably be, I guess it's because I might need it someday. And a lot of these guys on TV and a lot of these people that have the get-to-rich things, why are you doing all this? It's because it's for you in the future. I guess this man considered himself to be a good planner in the world's view. And he was. By our worldly standards, he had plenty for years and years and years. But in verse 20, all of a sudden we come to a halt. God says to him, you foolish man. Now, many of us might think, wait a minute, why is Jesus calling him a foolish man? He planned ahead. How can he be a fool? We hear the opposite of that in the world, don't we? Plan ahead, all for yourself, all for yourself. He's the model. He's on TV. He's the guy that wrote the book on success. Verse 20 goes on, this very night you will lose your life. Now the question, listen to this next question. I want you to take this as a question to yourself. Who gets what this rich man set aside for himself? Who gets what you set aside for yourself when you're gone? Somebody else. Sometimes we know them, sometimes we don't. It doesn't really matter, does it? But somebody's going to get it. And it's not because this guy was generous. It's because he was dead. Somebody else is going to get everything you have someday. I mean, it's going to happen to every one of us here. The things you've worked hard for, the things you've planned for, invested in, simply because one day you will die. You see, just as the rich man had no control over the prosperity that he got in his crops, he couldn't control the weather, he couldn't control when the locust came or didn't come, or the water. And in the same way, he had no control over the years that were given to him by God. He made 3 wrong assumptions. First, he assumed that he was the source of all his extra. And we can easily fall into that, can't we? Look what I did. Number 2, he assumed that all his extra was for him. And number 3, he made the big mistake assuming that the abundance of stuff was the same as the abundance of the years he had ahead. And he was wrong in all 3 accounts, wasn't he? Now listen to the moral of the story, verse 21. That is how it will be for anyone who stores things away for himself, but is not rich in God's eyes. Wow. It's almost like a warning. But you know, when we're living for God, it's not a warning for us. We look at, wow, everything I have is God's. And that's what we've been talking about, right? Don't simply store up things for yourself. And I think the part that Jesus said on that, I guess you could say a warning, be careful. Be careful of not wanting more and more and more. Because even if you're a Christian, it doesn't matter if you're a Christian or not, we can always fall into that trap, can't we? It's very tempting, like for these two.
Honey, what are you doing home? What's the matter?
This is the matter.
What is it? Is it a bill? Is it a late notice? Are they repossessing the car?
It's worse. It was sitting on my desk when I came back from lunch. It's from the HR department, and it's not payday.
What do you need?
Is that 15?
Are you getting fired?
Well, what else would it be? It's not like the payments have been rolling in lately.
Well, maybe we should look on the bright side. Maybe it's a garnishment of wages.
Maybe. What do we find out? It's a check.
A check?
It's a bonus check from the Sanderson deal. Thank you for your hard work and your benefit to the company. Yada, yada, yada. Enclosed, you'll find a check for $15,000.
Yada. Honey, do you know what this means?
Give you an extra money.
I can get dressed for the Christmas parties after all.
I can watch the bowl games in high definition TV.
Do you think we should use some of this on those?
What? Those are bills. We pay bills with regular money.
Rachel.
You know, the money you actually find in your coat pocket or your sofa cushion.
That is a big sofa cushion.
It's the same difference. It's money we weren't supposed to have. Money we were expecting. So we can't really be held responsible for not using it responsibly. Get to watch the bowl games in my plasma high definition television.
Oh, honey, I get a little bling bling for the dress.
Okay. Jewelry.
That reminds me. What about Angela? She lost everything in that store. I mean, she's in an awful position now. I mean, this money would be some.
You know, you're right. I tell you what, why don't we set aside $5,000? Just in case it ever happens to us.
Oh, and you thought you were good money. Does it have to be 5,000?
Well, yeah, we can just do 1,000. Besides, when's the last time a disaster ever happened to us?
The problem with the rich man in the parable was not that he was rich or that he had extra. The problem was that he didn't know why. He thought it was for him. He missed an opportunity to be rich in God. In 2 Corinthians chapter 8, verses 1 and 5. And you can turn if you want to. This, I never really caught this before. It really stood out to me for this. Paul shares what happens when believers do understand this parable. Now listen to this. Now I want to tell you, dear brothers and sisters, what God in His kindness has done for the churches in Macedonia. Though they have been going through much trouble and hard times, their wonderful joy and deep poverty have overflowed into rich generosity. For I can testify that they have gave not only what they could afford, but far more. And they did it in their own free will. They begged us again and again for the gracious privilege of sharing in the gift for the Christians in Jerusalem. Best of all, they went beyond our highest hopes, for their first action was to dedicate themselves to the Lord and to us for whatever directions God might give them. They understood the spiritual impact of giving with what they've been given from God. So they saw their money, their treasures, and their stuff as God's. And when these churches were in need, they jumped at the choice to help them or not. Which is totally opposite of what we're used to. It's like, oh no, we're a little church, we don't have this. Or, well, we're a big church, but we just put this building in. It's just, you see it as an opportunity like never before. And the funny thing is with that is, as many times as you do that, because I know, I don't think I'm the only one on this, but even when you want to give abundantly to somebody or a cause, and it's going to kind of put you over that thin part, you don't have a lot, you're still fighting it. Even though you see, wow, what an opportunity, or this is something I know God wants me to do, but you're like, what if I don't get reimbursed, or what if someone doesn't help me when I need it? We're always struggling with that. But that's the beauty of God's grace, and that's also the beauty of building our faith. Because when you do step out, your faith gets stronger. It's amazing. That's an amazing thing of God. Jesus says this is the only way you can keep your riches from being lost. You will be storing treasures in heaven that last forever. Thieves cannot steal that treasure, and moths cannot destroy it. Because when you're blessed with more, it is to be shared with those in need. If we would even live a week using this principle, I mean just a week of solid thinking this way and going against those little, I don't know, but really doing it. Because we go in and out of it all the time. If we're sick, it's really hard. If we're not feeling well, if we're really tired, if we had a hectic week at work, our job is just everything it takes out of us, you're not going to be sitting around saying, who can I help today? Who can I do? It's just not us. But our heart is there. But imagine if you thought that way all